The transport shuttle's engines hummed to silence as Talon Vire pressed his face against the small porthole, watching Orion's gate grow larger against the star-speckled void. The moon station looked like a crystalline flower blooming in space, its bioluminescent panels pulsing with soft blue light. After 3 years of terrestrial assignments, this diplomatic posting felt like stepping into another universe entirely. "Welcome to Orion's Gate, Engineer Vire." The voice was melodic, almost musical, carrying an accent he couldn't place. Talon turned from the docking bay's observation window to find himself looking at the most striking being he'd ever encountered. She stood about his height, with skin the color of pale amethyst that seemed to shimmer under the station's ambient lighting. Her hair was a cascade of dark curls that framed delicate features, large, expressive eyes that held intelligence and something else he couldn't quite identify. She wore a form-fitting uniform that accentuated her slender frame, and when she smiled, it was with genuine warmth. "I'm Celia," she continued, extending a hand with the same number of fingers as his own. "I've been assigned as your cultural liaison and personal assistant during your stay with us." Talon shook her hand, noting how surprisingly warm her skin felt. "Please, call me Talon. I appreciate the welcome." "Of course. Shall we begin your orientation tour? I imagine you're eager to see your new home." Celia gestured toward the corridor, her movements graceful and fluid. As they walked through the station's organic-looking hallways, Celia explained the Ilyari integration of technology and biology. The walls themselves were alive, she said, filtering air and providing illumination. Talon found himself fascinated not just by the information, but by the way her voice rose and fell with each explanation. "Your quarters are here," she said, stopping before a door that dilated open at their approach. "Mine are just across the hall, for convenience." The room was spacious and comfortable, with a large window overlooking the moon's surface. As Talon examined the sleeping area, he heard a mechanical whining sound from the adjacent washing facility. "Oh!" Celia exclaimed, sounding genuinely surprised. "The sonic shower's cleaning unit seems to be malfunctioning again." "How unexpected. I'll need to examine it more closely." She moved toward the bathroom, and Talon couldn't help but notice the subtle sway of her hips as she walked away. 3 weeks into his assignment, Talon had established a routine. Morning briefings with the engineering team, afternoon inspections of the station's biomechanical systems, and evening reports. What he hadn't expected was how often these routines seemed to intersect with Celia's mishaps. The cleaning unit incident had repeated itself 4 more times, always when Celia was using the sonic shower in his quarters for maintenance purposes. Each time, she'd emerge with slightly dampened hair and an apologetic smile, explaining some technical malfunction that required her immediate attention. "It's the humidity sensors," she'd say, her uniform clinging to her curves in ways that made Talon's concentration waver. "Very sensitive to atmospheric changes." Then there were the door malfunctions. Talon's evening walks through the station had become a habit, a way to clear his mind after long days. But increasingly, he'd find Celia's quarters mysteriously unlocked as he passed by, the door dilating open to reveal glimpses of her private space. Once, he'd caught sight of her at her mirror, brushing her dark curls, wearing something silky that caught the room's bioluminescent glow. "Oh, Talon," she'd called out, not seeming embarrassed at all. "The door's acting up again. How curious that it only happens when you're near." Her questions had grown more personal too. During their daily briefings, she'd steer conversations toward human physiology and psychology. "I'm fascinated by human visual processing," she'd say, leaning forward across the table. "What draws your attention most? Color patterns? Movement? Specific shapes?" The way she emphasized certain words made Talon suspect she wasn't asking purely for academic reasons. "Your species relies heavily on visual stimulation for attraction, doesn't it?" she'd continue, her violet eyes studying his face intently. "How do you determine compatibility through sight alone?" Talon found himself stumbling through explanations, acutely aware of how her uniform's neckline revealed the graceful curve of her throat, how her lips curved when she smiled at his awkward responses. The most unsettling incident happened during a routine maintenance check. Celia had been examining the atmospheric recycling systems when she'd called him over. "Could you help me reach the upper intake valve?" she'd asked, positioning herself so that when she stretched upward, her uniform rode up, revealing the small of her back and the curve of her waist. As he'd reached over her to adjust the valve, she'd leaned back slightly, her body briefly pressing against his. The contact had been electric, sending warmth through his entire body. "Thank you," she'd whispered, her voice softer than usual. "Your hands are so much stronger than mine." That night, Talon lay awake wondering if he was imagining things, or if his alien assistant was flirting with him in ways he didn't fully understand. The breakthrough came during what should have been a routine ventilation system inspection. Celia had requested his assistance in checking the air circulation units in the station's lower levels, claiming the readings were inconsistent. "The access panel is quite high," she'd explained, leading him to a maintenance corridor. "I'll need to stretch to reach it properly." Talon watched as she positioned herself beneath the panel, her movements deliberate and graceful. As she reached upward, her uniform stretched taut across her body, emphasizing every curve. But instead of immediately accessing the controls, she paused, glancing back at him over her shoulder. "Is this where I bend over?" she asked, her voice carrying a teasing lilt he'd never heard before. "That's what you humans notice, isn't it?" The words hit Talon like a physical blow. All the accidents, the mysterious door malfunctions, the probing questions about human attraction, it all clicked into place with sudden, startling clarity. "You've been doing this on purpose," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Celia turned to face him fully, her expression shifting from playful to serious. "Of course I have. Did you think I was truly that clumsy?" She stepped closer, close enough that he could see the subtle patterns in her pale purple skin. "I've been trying to gauge your interest for weeks, Talon." "Why?" The question came out rougher than he intended. "Because that's how it works in my culture. We don't simply declare attraction, we test it. We create opportunities for the other person to respond." Her fingers traced the edge of his uniform sleeve, sending shivers through him. "If you had ignored my signals completely, I would have understood you weren't interested. But you've been watching, haven't you? I can see it in the way your pupils dilate when I'm near, how your breathing changes." Talon's heart was racing. "And if I had responded earlier? Then you would have been accepting my courtship." Her smile was both beautiful and predatory. In Ilyari culture, acknowledging someone's advances is the same as agreeing to bond with them. Permanently. The weight of her words settled over him like a gravity shift. Permanently. We don't engage in casual relationships, Talon. When we choose someone, it's for life. She moved even closer, her hand resting flat against his chest. "I've been very patient, very careful. But I need to know, are you interested in me as more than just your assistant?" Looking into her eyes, feeling the warmth of her touch, Talon realized that his answer had been building for weeks. Every accident, every lingering glance, every moment of connection had been leading to this point. "Yes," he whispered, and watched as her smile transformed into something radiant and triumphant. The word hung in the air between them like a bridge being built. Celia's hand remained pressed against his chest, and Talon could feel his heart hammering against her palm. "Do you understand what you're agreeing to?" she asked, her voice soft but serious. "This isn't just attraction, Talon. Once we bond, we become part of each other's lives in ways your species might find intense." Instead of answering with words, Talon raised his hand to cup her face, his thumb tracing the high line of her cheekbone. Her skin was impossibly soft, warmer than he'd expected. "I've been thinking about you for weeks," he admitted. "Every time you walked into a room, every time you smiled at me, every time you asked those questions about human attraction, I wanted to answer honestly." "And what would you have said?" "That you're beautiful. That your voice does something to me I can't explain. That I've been going crazy trying to figure out if you were interested or if I was just projecting. His hand moved to tangle in her dark curls. I would have told you that I think about you when I'm trying to sleep. Celia's eyes fluttered closed at his touch. Show me, she whispered. The kiss was tentative at first, a gentle exploration of unfamiliar territory. But as Celia responded, her lips parting under his, tentative became urgent. She pressed closer, her body molding against his, and Talon discovered that despite their species' differences, some things were universal. Her hands found the fastenings of his uniform, her fingers more skilled than his trembling ones. My quarters, she breathed against his lips. They're more private than yours. The walk across the hall felt like crossing a galaxy. Once inside her room, with its softer lighting and the subtle scent of something floral, Celia turned to face him. Last chance to change your mind, she said, though her hands were already working at her own uniform. Once we do this, once we truly bond, there's no going back. Talon's response was to pull her close again, his lips finding the sensitive spot where her neck met her shoulder. She made a sound that was part gasp, part purr, and he felt her knees buckle slightly. I don't want to go back, he murmured against her skin. I want to go forward. With you. What followed was a slow, sweet exploration of differences and similarities. Celia's skin glowed faintly in the dim light, and she guided his hands to places that made her breath catch. She showed him how to touch her, how her species responded to gentle pressure and whispered words. When they finally came together, it was with a connection that felt deeper than physical, as if something fundamental in both of them had shifted and aligned. Afterward, as they lay entwined in her bed, Celia traced patterns on his chest with her fingertips. How do you feel? She asked. Different, Talon admitted. Like something's changed inside me. That's the bond forming, she said softly. You're mine now, Talon Vire. And I'm yours. Talon woke to the sensation of soft fingers trailing along his shoulder. The bioluminescent panels in Celia's quarters had dimmed to their night cycle, casting everything in a gentle blue glow. He turned to find her watching him with an expression of quiet contentment. Good morning, she murmured, her voice carrying a warmth that seemed to resonate in his chest. How did you sleep? Better than I have in months, he admitted, surprised by how true it was. There was something fundamentally different about waking up next to her, not just the obvious physical presence, but something deeper. He felt settled. Complete in a way he'd never experienced before. Celia smiled, pressing a soft kiss to his collarbone. That's the bond stabilizing. Among my people, we believe that finding your bonded partner is like finding the missing piece of your soul. Is that what happened? We're bonded now. We are. Her fingers found his, intertwining with practiced ease. I can feel your emotions, your general well-being. It's subtle now, but it will grow stronger over time. Eventually, we'll be able to sense each other's thoughts and feelings even when we're apart. The magnitude of what they'd done began to sink in. Celia, I need to understand what this means for us. For my assignment here. She propped herself up on one elbow, her expression becoming more serious. It means several things. First, you'll need to inform your superiors about our bonding. In diplomatic circles, it's actually considered advantageous, bonded pairs are seen as bridges between species. And second, your assignment here was supposed to be temporary. 2 years maximum. Her hand traced along his jaw. But I can't leave Orion's Gate. This station is my life's work, my contribution to the Ilyari collective. And now that we're bonded, I can't leave either, Talon finished, understanding flooding through him. Not without you. Would you want to stay here permanently, I mean? Build a life with me among the stars? Talon considered the question, looking around the room that had become a sanctuary. Through the large window, he could see the station's garden levels, where Ilyari and human children played together under artificial sunlight. The sight filled him with unexpected longing. "I think I would," he said slowly. "I think I've been looking for a place to belong my whole life, and I never expected to find it in orbit around a distant moon with an alien woman who orchestrated elaborate accidents to get my attention." Celia laughed, the sound musical and joyful. "They weren't that elaborate. Though I did have to convince the cleaning unit to malfunction on command. That took some creativity." "What about children?" The question surprised him with its suddenness, but once asked, he realized how much he wanted to know the answer. Ilyari-human bonding is rare but not unprecedented. We're genetically compatible, though any children would be hybrids, carrying traits from both species. Her eyes sparkled with mischief. "Are you already thinking about expanding our family, Talon Vire?" "Maybe," he admitted, pulling her closer. "I love you, Celia. I don't know how it happened so fast, but I do. It happened because we were meant for each other," she said simply. "The bond doesn't create love, it recognizes it. What we feel was always there, waiting for the right moment to emerge." As they lay together watching the stars whirl slowly past the window, Talon realized that his life had just taken a turn he never could have predicted. But with Celia warm and content in his arms, he couldn't imagine wanting anything different. "So," he said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head, "what other accidents do you have planned?" Her answer was a smile that promised many more delightful surprises to come.